The word why. What a curious word. The kind of word that can make us cringe, feel defensive, or even distant. But you know, sometimes why is the key. A key that can unlock so much to our lives. Join me as we explore the why with fascinating contributors to the world, those that entertain us, inform us, teach us about life, and if we're lucky, inspire the next in all of us. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and welcome to HeadRoom, a production of Rainlight and co-produced by Old Soul. Let's go. Well, many of you who've been following, and thank you, my journeys over especially the last 9 or 10 months, know my growing affinity for the African continent. And I'm just recently now back from Uganda, an incredible experience, and I'm sure we'll get to in this conversation. But we're going to extend the discussion around Africa and really global education with an existing friend, someone that I'm very, very passionate about sort of and mirroring their goals and what they're really trying to do. I've had the privilege of breaking bread with this individual and now I think a new friend as well in South Africa. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Let me introduce Hardeep Gulati. He is the CEO of PowerSchool. As the CEO of PowerSchool, he has helped the company introduce award-winning unified education technology solutions, and he continues to make a lasting impact on the future of K-12 education. Roger Sithole, he is the chairman and education managing director of African-based company OneConnect, and he's been with the technology company in various roles for the past 14 years. Now, many of you know about PowerSchool, but there's so much going on. I want to give you a little bit of a background for those that are not here in the US that may want to learn more about PowerSchool, but they're the leading provider of cloud-based software for K-12 education in North America. Their mission is to power the education ecosystem with unified technology that helps educators and students realize their full potential in their way. PowerSchool connects students, teachers, administrators, and parents with a shared goal of improving student outcomes. From the office to the classroom to the home, it helps schools and districts efficiently manage state reporting and related compliance, special education, finance, human resources, talent registration, attendance, funding, learning, instruction, grading, assessments, and analytics in one unified platform. They support over 50 million students globally and more than 15,000 customers, including more than 90 of the top 100 districts by student enrollment in the US. And they sell solutions in more than 90 countries. And I know we're going to get Hardeep to more because that's growing even as we speak today. Rogers and OneConnect. Let's talk about OneConnect. It's a multifaceted tech company headquartered in South Africa with regional offices in Kenya and Mozambique, offering over 14 years, of turnkey technology services and solutions to small and large businesses throughout Africa. Their hallmark suite of innovative tech solutions and products, complemented by the experience and qualifications of their people, offer excellence in execution and after-sales service and support on an ongoing basis. Their education division aims to democratize education on the continent by offering solutions for every stage of the education cycle. Well, that's... I need to take a drink of my coffee here. You guys both are representing two powerhouse organizations that, you know, when I saw the announcement, and we're going to talk about the Power Partner program with both of you and what you're aiming to do across the African continent. But I saw the image and I saw the picture in the press release. And Hardeep, I immediately went to knowing you, breaking bread with you, and thinking, I bet you Hardeep is one happy guy, not just as the leader of PowerSchool, but as a dad, as someone who has a vision that goes beyond the horizon of the US. Talk about the moment that was captured in that press release, if you will, when you and Rogers were basically sort of inking the partnership that you have together now.
Thanks, Rod, and really appreciate again this opportunity. You're absolutely right. This has been our PowerSchool dream. This has been my dream that we want to really take the full capabilities of how we have transformed K-12 education in North America to be able to really make an impact globally, and especially parts of the world where you really need that impact even more so. In fact, there's a famous words from Dr. Nelson Mandela about education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And we have always had our eyes on being able to really make impact into different continents. We have actually been working with Roger for the last few months, figuring out how it would be best for us to really able to bring these solutions. And as you know, it's hard. International expansions are hard, but at the same time, with the right partnerships, with the right deep embedded relationships that we can actually go and bring these solutions to the local markets with local support allows us to really make the global solutions more easily available to all the schools in African continent. So we're very excited about this partnership and really looking forward to start making an immediate impact this year.
Hardeep, let's go specifically to the impact the pandemic had in digital transformation when we think about sort of what was done, what was experienced, and what the results were here in the US, and how that impacted maybe the timing of this partnership when you think about sort of what you and PowerSchool learned, and then the application to then take that to the African continent.
Yeah, it's a good point. Even if you think about before pandemic, there have been strong tailwinds about digital transformation in education. I think anybody who's an educator or even a parent who has to deal with their kids' education know that there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of really adopting technology into the classrooms, adopting technology to help support the child and engage them better, support the educators, and as well as improve the entire school operations to make them more efficient and connected, bring them to the modern world. And that problem exists globally. But we definitely saw during pandemic, everybody had to scramble and be able to really leverage whatever tools and technologies they were able to do. But when you look at even in North America, even with all the effort, there were significant amount of learning loss. And that was in weeks. And there's a lot of data studies which show you that. But now you take that to the rest of the world where some of these technology tools were not as easy accessible. And some of the learning loss was not a matter of weeks. It was actually months and even almost a year. And that's significant. That's like losing 1 year, months of education or 1 year of a child's life has a significant long-term implications on their learning abilities, as well as being able to really have impact their engagement and morale as well. So we really are seeing post-pandemic a growing recognition across the globe that the education investments, especially around enabling continuity of learning, has to be on the forefront for most of the countries, as well as not just private schools but even public schools and the broader infrastructure. So that demand has definitely accelerated over the last 2 years. And we're seeing that across the board, and that recognition we are absolutely seeing in Middle East, we're seeing in India, we are seeing in Asia, and we're also seeing in the Latin American and African continents as well.
Before I bring Rogers into the discussion, can you briefly, Hardeep, just talk about how did you find Rogers or did he find you? And then also what countries are you looking to expand within the African continent?
So it's a great question. And, we're really fortunate to have the benefit that Roger actually has been helping other technology companies within our with our sister companies by, supporting through some of the Vista companies like TIPCO. So he comes with very high recommendation. And not only technology companies, in fact, we had the benefit of Roger already been working in different education institutes, especially on the higher education side. So somebody who's very strong technology-wise, as well as somebody who's very already embedded into the education infrastructure, it was a perfect combination. So I got a chance to spend some time with Roger in Middle East while we were, as we know, we have been expanding our presence there significantly, and really laid the foundation for for us to really build that relationship to the next level.
So Rogers, thank you for your patience here. I wanted to get some background there from Hardeep in sort of what PowerSchool is seeing and how they're taking lessons learned in the US, obviously post-pandemic. Look, it's even hard for those, you can't see my face, but I have such a love for the continent in the time that I've spent, because I've really seen, I've gone behind the scenes. I've been within the communities, to include refugee camps and capital cities. And there are lots of different both challenges and opportunities when we think about education throughout the continent. Can you sort of educate the audience on some of the elements that we may or may not take for granted in parts of the world where we may not have similar challenges to sub-Saharan Africa?
Rod, thank you so much. Actually, I think first, let me just say it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today with Hardeep as well. Look, I'm an African child, born and bred in the continent, and the challenges that you've experienced are challenges that that I know very well. It's a beautiful continent, a continent that has got quite a young age or young population, as it's very well known. Great resources that exist within the continent, yet we do have inherent issues or challenges that exist within the continent. A basic thing that somebody might take for granted is from an education perspective, it's just the luxury of having a classroom, just a four-wall classroom with chairs and a desk. That's a luxury that some parts of the continent do not necessarily have. I always share the story that I walked into a ministry office. I met with a specific minister of education in a country, I won't specify which, but and as I walked in, I saw a picture, a beautiful picture. I thought it was a painting actually, of kids that were sitting under a classroom, and then I said, "Wow, that reminds me of the days when we used to, have classes under a classroom and under a tree rather." And the person that was accompanying me to the minister's office said, no, that's actually an existing class at the moment in a specific area of the continent. And I was taken aback. So these are some of the challenges that we still have today. Basic issue of connectivity. Look, devices are quite perverse. They're quite, the penetration of devices, of smart devices, it's quite across the continent. You'll find them everywhere, but data, basic issue of data, which others may take for granted, that is Wi-Fi everywhere you go. Unfortunately, those are still challenges that exist within the continent. The quality of teachers, we talk about, how we need to be bringing in tech, how we need to be using tech, and yet we still have teachers that, are not necessarily at the level that they need to be, not because they are incapable, but because of lack of digital training that still needs to happen. As the world is moving into the digital space, we still have teachers or educators that are unfortunately left behind, that still need to be taken along. If you think of a student, or if you think of your typical student, they you give them a device today, they will figure themselves around the device, and yet you may find a teacher has been teaching for 30 years and utilizing a chalkboard. That's the way in which they're teaching, and all of a sudden we're asking these teachers to be digital savvy, and still yet be very good teachers. So these are some of the challenges that exist. There are some socioeconomic challenges that exist within the continent, and it's quite important that those are understood for us to then be able to come up with the right solutions. From a tech perspective, we really need to understand those socioeconomic challenges that exist within the continent. And I think, in your travels to Uganda, in your travels to the Senegal, you would have noticed, if you've gone into those countries, you would have noticed some of the challenges that exist that are quite on your face within the continent.
Yeah, you can't miss them. I mean, that's what's fascinating about it. I mean, this is, I'd like to think of it from an opportunity perspective, but I do think when we talk about educating the world in general, just about different places that we want to go in and sort of build opportunity, you're going to places where there are cultural differences, where it may be that the eldest child is the one that has been chosen to be educated, and or that needs to stay in the village and work, and or we talk about insecurity of food and water, but power, right? For those that have been to the continent, depending upon where you are, you'll have experiences where you can be somewhere in public and the power just regularly goes out.
Sure.
Well, there are implications to that when we're talking about a relationship to technology. Hardeep, I'm going to pull you in here in just a second. I want to share a quick story. And I know that this is maybe on the extreme end of it, but I had experiences in both of those countries where there were young people, teenagers, that had never seen a computer before in their life, right? They had never, even just talking about email was, of course, this was like talking about another planet. And what a powerful experience to have them look at my laptop that I had and sort of walk them through, and they just wanted to see, what they wanted to see, Rogers? They wanted to see images of the world. Like, of all things. I thought it was just, I don't know why it didn't come to my mind, but that was so powerful that in two different countries, I had all these different kids they just wanted to see what the rest of the world looked like. Like, that to me is, if that's not education, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Hardeep,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the discussions and how you turn challenges into opportunities when you have sort of the muscle of, and I'll say that, the muscle of a power school that has obviously been around and been incredibly successful, not just in one country or on one continent, but across the globe. How do you take those challenges and flip them into opportunities when we're talking about delivering and supporting education?
Yeah, Rod, first to this, the point you made about it, to me, education is the biggest equalizer, right? That's what can bring all the different aspects, on a more equal basis. And you guys are absolutely right. It's not just a matter of technology tools, but it's a matter of actual access. It's a matter of making sure that culturally we can, get that recognition. And a lot of what we do in terms of, to your point about from a solutions, is that we're powering the ministries, we're powering the teachers, and then powering the classrooms. And some of our rollouts of our solutions that really help the ministry to understand where are the equity issues, where are the access issues, and then also to be able to work with the different teachers in terms of empowerment and training of the teachers. Before even getting the devices in front of a student classroom, we can already make an impact in terms of making sure that we are able to recruit teachers and give them the tools and the curriculums and the content that they need to make sure that they can, even with their current infrastructure, whether they're teaching under a tree or they're teaching in different forums, they can still have the benefit of having all the different tools in their hands that will help them be more effective, even in a teaching in a non-online manner. But then, absolutely, I think one of the beauties of this partnership with Roger is that they're a full turnkey technology provider. So they also can bring in the different technology aspects of access and laptops and devices, and being able to really partner with us to bring the solutions into the classrooms into different forms. It reminds me a couple of years back when we had done some work in Haiti with a couple of partners like Apple, like Jamf, where we were able to put entire classroom in one shipping container, having its own satellite and solar access, and allowing kids to come in and get additional training in that whole environment. Doesn't matter where you put that pod. And that's a kind of creative solutions that we can bring in together, also bringing in other private and public partnerships to kind of really support this initiative at a massive scale.
Help me understand, Hardeep, the sort of the onboarding. And I know it's not a one size fits all, and every country and area is going to be probably a little bit different. But how should we understand the onboarding? And that may not be even the right term to use. And how will you and Rogers collectively evaluate success along the way? And the one caveat to this is, I think we do take for granted, maybe in the West or in the US, where we just slot a 10-year-old might be a fifth grader. And we've got sort of these, we have these categories. It's very easy and neat to put things on shelves here in the US, Rogers. But I ran into so many that were either, let's say, in their mid-20s, but they still had a desire to learn, but because they missed windows of opportunity. And also those younger students that might be either behind or ahead, depending upon an opportunity they previously had that had elevated their knowledge base. So help me understand the role time, because I do think time is significant in this. If we could have time as a representative on the podcast, we would, right? But help me understand, Hardeep, the way in which you look at time, onboarding, and then the evaluation of the partner program. HeadRoom is produced by Old Soul, a one-stop marketing agency that understands the power of brand and nuance. Reach out to my guy Matt at Old Soul and supercharge your brand and content strategy. That's Old Soul. Shoot Matt a note at aoldsoul.com. That's AOLDSOUL.com. And now, back to our guest.
One thing I'll tell you, Rod, is that this was even an eye-opener for me during pandemic, that even when you look at US, we might think US is very, have access very available, but you'd be surprised. 25% of the kids did not have access to devices or internet to be able to really have continuity of learning. There was a lot of significant investment and effort put in to drive that. We recently announced that Puerto Rico selected us to really now transform even like a Puerto Rico territory, which has huge challenges because of all the different impacts from the different hurricanes, a huge amount of connectivity and continuity problems with the learning. We saw that in country of Uruguay, where they're using our platform to really, almost provide continuity of learning to 800,000 students across the the entire country with all remote accesses and different levels. So we have faced these challenges. We have been working on how to really, even enable the benefit of these solutions, whether it's in terms of making sure that we have the right content and training for the teachers so that they know how most effectively to deal with the different engagement issues and learning achievement gaps, as well as social emotional support, as well as taking it all the way to different levels of the schools. Now, this is an important part, which a lot of countries are almost in a bind where, hey, if I can really make it accessible to every child, then I should not be making this investment. And I think that's a wrong attitude, because at that point, if you can't tackle the whole problem, you don't want to kind of do anything. That's not going to work. I think what we are working with a lot of countries is that let's start initiating these initiatives on your urban districts and your private schools and your well-supported schools. Get the engagement going, see the benefit of it, see the value of it, and then now be able to get the backing from public and private partnerships to kind of really now address the harder aspects of the access and see if we can really bring the resources and support from the banks, from the nonprofits, from private companies who have interest in those areas to really support the technology push into those regions. But we need those proof points in these countries. So our first work with Roger is really working with the ministries, but also working with cities where the infrastructure is already available, and get our solutions embedded in there, start seeing the value, and then being able to use those proof points to really make a more broader impact in those communities.
So my interpretation, Rogers, to what Hardeep is talking about, which I think is incredibly valuable, is understanding, sort of having a cultural awareness, right, to the daily interactions, the practices of communities, to include policy as well. Can you speak to that? Because I think that, there are countless examples throughout history where you have a solution and you drop it into a different environment, and then you say, well, why didn't it work? And it's like, well, there's so much more than whatever that solution was, which is context. And so can you speak to just the discussion maybe that has to happen and on a local level, to where we don't just assume that everybody is going to want to open up the proverbial box and say, oh, this is an incredible gift. let's integrate this in, because that's assuming that they understand the value of even what they're seeing. Talk a little bit about those conversations. And I don't want to say software adoption, but you kind of understand where I'm going, this sort of cultural adoption and understanding of what the opportunity is.
Yeah, actually, I would even just take a little step back and say, as much as I spoke about what the challenges that exist in the continent, it's not all doom and gloom. And I think that is important to lay the context in that we do have leaders in the continent that are quite progressive in their thinking, that are willing to accept solutions like this, that are able to, want the help that is available. We don't have to recreate things that are already existing around the globe. So PowerSchool, for example, they are a leader in this space. We don't have to recreate that. However, the deployment or how PowerSchool is integrated or it's implemented within the continent, it's important that it's done within the context of the challenges and within the continent. And I think that's where the value that OneConnect is going to be bringing into this partnership. It's not that we are only with technologies, we understand education, but we also understand the context at which these solutions needs to be implemented, and that's very important. There are things that are a cultural misfit that you may think, oh, come on, man, that for us in the US that's fine, it's okay. What's your problem? And then you find that it's an absolute no-no in a specific country within the continent, even within the continent itself. It's not necessarily, Africa is not just a country; it's made up of multiple countries, and there are different, contexts that we need to be even taking account of. I mean, you've got the Francophone, you've got the Anglophone, and you need to be quite aware of that. You need to be quite understanding of, what works and what doesn't work. But I'm very, pleased and encouraged by the fact that, we've got leaders in the continent that have identified those challenges that we have. They are aware of the challenges that we have within the continent, and they're very much keen and happy, to be assisted. I've seen this in our engagements, with multiple countries, with multiple ministries, with multiple institutions of teaching and learning, the way they are absolutely willing, and they are open as well, and they're very understanding that, look, we're living in a world where it's no longer about teaching a child that needs to compete in a specific village. It's about teaching a child that needs to compete in the global village. It's no longer about this little sport. When I was learning it, about competing with the kids on my street as to who gets the best grades. Now it's about a global village in itself. So there's that understanding. It's not just a sense of there's just doom and gloom, and there's no understanding in terms of what needs to be done. So that's really encouraging, and I think the partnership and our understanding of those challenges and the link, I think that's what's going to help in bridging that divide between the context of the US and what happens within the continent of Africa.
What a beautiful description. I could not agree more. The optimism and the really powerful voices on the continent when it comes to being progressive in education. Hardeep, so a question for you. So when I was there and collaborating with you in PowerSchool in Uganda, it was fascinating for me to see. And I think sometimes we do need to slow down to be able to speed up, right? And sometimes, the old adage of stop and smell the roses, it was so powerful for me on a daily basis to see kids, because when I was in Uganda, school just started, right? And so to see kids walking down the street with one textbook in their hand, holding it as if it was their life, right? And excited to show you when you stopped and spent time with them. We're in this sort of abundance of resources where, kids have as much as they want and some, but to stop and slow down and say, wow, the power of that one piece of curriculum and what that means, I think is really powerful when we think about kind of what we're valuing and what we're not. Do you see that there's going to be some secondary benefit? That's a long way of saying, do you think there's going to be some secondary benefit to other countries that PowerSchool collaborates with in lessons learned in partnerships with the Rogers of the world to have that understanding of, yes, we have all of these different things that we can offer, but boy, we're really finding that this one set has been incredibly valuable, and that we glean some information that allows us to then improve moving forward.
It's a great point. And I think, some of us who've had the exposure, and I grew up in India, and when you, to your point about in terms of the resources available, right? We have a huge amount of advantage. But what we also see is whether I'm traveling to Asia, whether I'm traveling to Middle East, or I'm traveling to Africa, I do see the passion with the educators who are actually making that education happen. Doesn't matter with whatever the resources you point, they're taking that one book access to them and making full use of it and creating the next generation and empowering them. That it is truly, to Roger's point, that kid, it doesn't matter which part of the world, is ready to compete with anywhere else in the world. And I think it has actually, during the pandemic, where I think there's also more realization that education challenges and education opportunities are equally available. And there's probably a common thread that we can really leverage across the globe, that there's no reason why some of this work we are doing in a Puerto Rico territory or Uruguay or in Thailand cannot be replicated in Africa. And we have schools in Philippines, few 100,000 students in Philippines with different parts who are leveraging our technology. And with the partnerships, with the local partnerships, like what we're doing with Roger, have built the curriculum, that local curriculum, into our tool and make that now suddenly easily accessible. And the power is the tools like what we provide is that it's not just we kind of get afraid about the technology cost and how would that access. The benefit of it is really what it does. It helps you make that more easily accessible to everybody. Quite a lot of people have phones. Quite a lot of people have a different, at least some level of access to technology at the school level or in the class level. Even with that, we can actually now start bringing all the power of all the same curriculum content and open education resources that can now benefit a child within Africa in that classroom. And that's what we are able to bring, the same level of curriculum and content and that access and those tools and tips to a child in Africa that's available to any kid in the US. And that's the power of our platform, is that we are bringing not just the technology, we're bringing in the full turnkey solutions around with our content navigation, which we've launched, which has 4 million open education resources. We can kind of make that easily now able to, without having a huge amount of curriculum costs for these countries.
Rogers, in 10 years, when I am sitting with you at a coffee shop in South Africa, and I ask you to reflect on the previous 10 years, talk about the sense of pride that, this is my hunch, just even through our Zoom here, I'm getting a good beat on you. Talk a little bit about the sense of pride that I think you'll have in playing, and I find you to be a very humble individual, even just a small part in the transformation, not just of South Africa, but the continent.
Yeah. Let me take, where am I now? What's my vision now, so that I can be able to measure it back forward 10 years. I envisage, using technology to bridge the divide that exists between those that have and those that do not have, so that each and every child within the continent can have access to good quality education, independent of their geography within the continent and independent of their financial standing within the continent. I talk about democratization of education, meaning I want it to be a basic right, which it is, that is defined by UN as a basic right. And as such, each child needs to be able to have access to that good quality education that's going to make them compete across the world. In 10 years' time, I want to be able to look back and be able to see exactly that. I want to be able to see a kid in a village in Kenya versus a kid in South Africa, having exactly the same equal opportunities in terms of their employability, in terms of their entrepreneurial skills, in terms of them being able to make a change in the continent and be able to make a change in the world because of the education that they've been able to get. Like Hardeep indicated, he quoted Nelson Mandela, I grew up learning that education is the key to success. The only way that we can be able to end the poverty cycle that exists within the continent, it's by educating our population, is by getting sure that our youth, our young ones are educated, that they can be able to compete in this very otherwise challenging global society. For me, that would be a very exciting and a very humbling, review, sitting back and seeing, even at the small scale, if we can be able to do that, even at the small scale, we would have done great within the continent. I'm very hopeful, and I get excited quite a lot in terms of, as a technologist, what we can utilize with technology, but at the same time, as somebody who's quite fond of education in terms of what it is that we can able to do with education to bridge this divide that exists. For me, that's exciting.
Rogers, for the listener, can you describe the image and what is on the image in the picture behind you?
I've got dream big and laugh out loud.
Dream big and laugh out loud. Yeah.
Dream big and laugh out loud. Sometimes our challenges, may stop us from dreaming. If I live in a block of shacks, all what I'm surrounded by is shacks. That's all I see. I do not know how Manhattan looks like. For somebody who lives in Manhattan, that's their base, right? That's their, you can imagine what it is that they can dream. But for somebody that is a little contained in a small space, they may not have the ability to dream. But one thing that I know we have as well in the continent is the ability to be happy within our circumstances. So that picture saying, let's dream independent of what our circumstances is or are, and then still continue to be happy, and let's laugh out at our challenges and laugh out at whatever comes our way.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because that has been my experience absolutely with incredible people. Hardeep, let's close with this. So the easy question would be for me to ask you sort of what's the vision moving forward, but I want to take a different direction, if you don't mind, which is to say, I think that we live in a world of entrepreneurialism, sort of regardless of where we are on the map, right? So people are dreaming, to Roger's point, and thinking, I have a good idea. And many start to then think, well, maybe this idea could migrate. But there's very few that not only can sort of set a course, but activate that course. And PowerSchool has done that. And I don't want to take for granted or underscore to be in so many different countries, making the kind of impact and significant steps forward. I mean, we're talking, you and I sat down, it's almost been a year now, where we sat down, I believe it was in San Diego, and to think about the growth, even just in like 10 months in your plan and some of the things that you shared with me, it's just absolutely incredible. And I'm wondering about the confidence, not just that you've experienced in yourself, but the confidence in the organization. Because to me, this is an organizational component, right? This is the Robert Speeds of the world, right? And the Tim Russells and the entire team that I've gotten now to sort of quickly get to know in our collaboration in Uganda. Talk about the confidence of the organization to put your foot forward and to not only take a risk, but to do it with confidence so that we can see the smiles and the engagement with the Rogers of the world.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I just look back and, really look at what we accomplished over the last many years, almost 7 years since we've been independent. And it's been remarkable in terms of the impact we've had. And to your point, the organization I have a fortune to really lead is that passion runs pretty deep in every person in terms of that they're not just satisfied with, hey, we are happy to do that one area and one region. They really are driven by the passion, the vision, which you guys articulated about, hey, we want to be able to transform education for every child globally. And we know that's a big task. It's not an easy feat, but the only way we can get there is that really continue to build the scale and the resources that we can really, impact to that level. And there has been a phenomenal amount of entrepreneurship and innovation in education. But one of the biggest challenges in education, especially in K-12, is that the scaling that to even at a national level has been difficult, because most of the education perceptions are generally that it's very different for each region. And I think we are in the fortunate time that barrier is off. We truly education now, any technology, any curriculum, any content, any resources, any strategies we're putting in, they're very much application, whether I'm talking to LA Unified or I'm talking to Puerto Rico or whether I'm talking to a country in Africa. We have the same opportunity. We have the same ability to make that impact. And a lot of the pieces what we have built, we have already proven that we can take that to any part of the world and make an impact. And I'm really excited about this, our initiative and partnership with Roger, because I truly believe within the year, we can actually come back and showcase you 500,000 students who are going to be benefiting. And that's a level of scale we can quickly make an impact. And that's what gets me very excited. And again, thanks to my organization, they're really driven and marching full steam ahead. And I'm very confident that we would be able to even cross that milestone.
Well, I hope that I have done my due diligence here in sharing what's going on in Africa with obviously what you're doing, Hardeep, PowerSchool, OneConnect, and Rogers. This show is called HeadRoom. And when I came up with the concept of HeadRoom, it was really sort of that space that you have to dream and how big is that space, whether you get into a car or an airplane. But I encourage people, if you get a chance, vacation, volunteer, whatever it is you can do, get to the continent of Africa. It is absolutely incredible. It's inspiring and it's rejuvenating to one's, I think, spirit and identity in the way in which we can support one another and learn from one another. I have some very dear friends there, and I hope many more. Rogers, I'd like to add you to that list. What a fantastic partnership. It's going to be great to check out the Power Partner Program to see, obviously, Hardeep, how you guys continue to grow and expand and to see the results, Rogers, and what you're able to implement in the partnership. We want to thank Hardeep Gulati. He's the CEO of PowerSchool, and Rogers Sithole. He is the chairman and education managing director of the African-based company OneConnect. I am your host, Dr. Rod Berger. Thanks for taking the plunge into HeadRoom, where we uncover the why behind the what and who impacting our lives. HeadRoom is a production of Rainlight and co-produced by our friends at Old Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and this is HeadRoom.